Thank you for joining us. The fallout from the Ford government's decision to abruptly close the Science Centre continues to pick up steam tonight. As the government looks for a temporary location, Toronto's commercial real estate community is highlighting some options, while we're also learning more about the people who work there who have already been laid off. That's even though the Ministry of Infrastructure said people would not lose their jobs. Dale Manukduk has the story.
The iconic Ontario Science Centre is 568,000 square feet, but the building and the green space around it has been fenced off. The province closed it to the public last week, citing safety concerns due to an aging roof. Now the Ford government is looking to open a temporary site, albeit much smaller.
This building right here has 160,000 square feet of exhibition space. So quite frankly, we feel that what he is offering to Ontarians is effectively a Chuck E. Cheese, not a science center.
The province put out a request for proposal. It's looking for 50,000 to 100,000 square feet, a property that's centrally located near a major public transit station, as well as 500 parking spaces and a food court nearby.
Luckily, an awful lot of our downtown office has been built with that in mind as well.
This commercial real estate analyst says that wish list isn't far-fetched and that there are about 20 vacant buildings downtown sitting empty as a result of the pandemic.
One Front Street, which is adjacent to Union Station. I think, most people will know it as the building that looks like it's part of Union, but it's not really part of Union. That is completely vacant, 400,000 square feet, sitting there waiting to be used.
While the search for a new, smaller location marches on, so is the fight to keep the building where it is. Known as the godfather of artificial intelligence, Jeffrey Hinton is committing $1 million to repairing the roof.
While I was working at Google and making a high salary, I set up a foundation. The foundation has $5 million. And I think this is a very good use of $1 million from that foundation. I was a single parent for a while, and I used to take my children there regularly at weekends. I loved various aspects of it. I loved the rainforest.
Hinton says he was inspired by other large gestures of philanthropy to keep the building open. There's also a letter online demanding the same, which has racked up over 50,000 signatures. The impacts of the closure are already being felt. The union, representing some 50 food service workers, says their members have begun receiving layoff notices.
These aren't like highly paid workers. They are almost all women. They're almost all racialized. A whole slew of them live in the community right there.
Last week, the government said there are no immediate job losses for Science Centre staff. The food service workers are employed by an outside contractor who the union says is trying to redeploy the members.
When I spoke with the government, I tried to extract a commitment that not a single worker would lose a paycheck or a job. We know that the cost of living crisis is enormous right now. And, most of us are one paycheck away from some pretty devastating circumstances.
CBC Toronto asked the province if it would be supporting laid-off workers, but did not receive a response. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
As we track the fallout of the closure, there are also questions continuing to swirl tonight about the abrupt decision in the first place. Now we've learned hundreds of aging public buildings in the province use the same roofing material that triggered the closure, yet the Science Centre is the only one that's been shut down over safety concerns. Our senior reporter at Queen's Park, Mike Crawley, has that part of our coverage tonight.
When the government abruptly shut down the Science Centre, officials blamed its lightweight concrete roofing panels and the risk that some could collapse under a winter snowfall.
This is indisputably a health and safety issue.
Reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete, or RAC for short, is common in flat-roofed buildings from the 1960s or early 70s. It's mostly air and can weaken if water gets in.
If you do have a problem with a RAC panel, you can't rely on all the surrounding panels and roof elements to hold it up. So what could be a very localized issue could turn into an actual problem.
Why did that shatter so easily?
In Britain last year, the government ordered the closure of more than 100 schools with RAC roofs, triggering outrage in Parliament.
Children cowering under steel props to stop the ceiling falling in on their heads.
But that's not happening here in Ontario. There are nearly 400 schools with this type of roofing in the province. Not a single one has been closed. 46 of these are in the TDSB.
Bottom line is that students and staff are safe in these schools. Had we for 1 second thought there was a safety concern, we would be relocating students and staff out of that area of the building or out of the building altogether, but that is not the case.
And dozens more provincial buildings have rack roofs. All that is triggering questions about why the Science Centre is the only one that's been shut down.
It feels like a manufactured crisis, doesn't it?
Elsa Lam is editor of Canadian Architect magazine. She has examined the engineering reports about the Science Centre's roof.
I don't see a call to close the Science Centre immediately, and I also don't see anything about the entire roof collapsing.
The engineering report does say the roof sections that need to be fixed by winter could be replaced at a price of $7 million.
Premier Ford, we have questions about the Science Centre.
We tried to ask the Premier about all this today, but he wasn't answering. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
And at City Hall tomorrow, the Science Centre's closure is also up for debate. City Hall reporter Sean Jeffords now on what councillors are asking for.
We know that councillors were shocked, surprised, even frustrated. We're hearing that today about the sudden closure of the Ontario Science Centre. Last year, councillors, when they heard that the province was planning to largely move the programming from the Science Centre down to the Ontario Place site, they had asked city staff to look at feasibility of operating the site down on the east side to continue use there, to continue science programming in that space. That work has been ongoing, as we understand it. So there's a motion coming to council. We believe it will be tomorrow to speed that work up a little bit and further examine feasibility of potentially the city taking over the site. Councillor Josh Matlow is behind that push. Here's what he had to say today about the Ontario Science Centre.
The other thing I want us to look at is if they're not willing to continue operating the Science Centre, can the City of Toronto work on a plan to make it feasible? This obviously would have to come with provincial money, and they would have to be a partner in making sure that it happens.
So right there, Chris, there's a key question. You know, the city is cash-strapped, $1 billion deficits over the last number of years every year, and I think a lot of people will wonder how it can afford to take on additional costs to fund programming at a science centre under Toronto's watch. You know, Mayor Olivia Chow, however, has said, you know, she's really curious what staff will report back, and has said she doesn't want to see the province just walk away from this. So obviously, it's one to watch tomorrow.
Yeah, certainly. Very interesting indeed. All right, Sean Jeffords for us at City Hall. Thank you, Sean.
Thanks, Chris.
To other news now, and additional charges have been laid against Canadian billionaire Frank Stronach. Earlier this month, the 91-year-old was charged with 5 offenses, including rape and forcible confinement against 3 women between 1980 and last year. Now, Peel police confirm he's facing 8 more criminal counts. Stronach denies all the allegations, and Thomas Dagla walks us through these latest developments.
For decades, Frank Stronach commanded a multinational business empire. Now at age 91, he's facing more criminal charges in connection with alleged sexual offenses. Peel Regional Police say on Wednesday, Stronach was again arrested and charged with 6 counts of sexual assault and historical charges of attempted rape and indecent assault on a female.
Held a very high position.
First arrested earlier this month, Stronach is facing 13 charges in all, including rape, stemming from allegations spanning several decades.
There is no statute of limitations like you might see in other countries. So an offense, someone complaining about an offense that happened in the 70s or the 60s or the 80s can still be prosecuted today.
Stronach's lawyer, Brian Greenspan, said in a statement, Mr. Stronach denies and will vigorously defend these further untested allegations dating back to 1977. He has spent his lifetime committed to the betterment of the Canadian community and industry. Stronach himself didn't take our call.
Nice to hear from you.
Born in Austria, he came to Canada and founded Magna International, growing the auto parts giant that helped make him a billionaire.
We want to be open with our workers. We want to share our profits with them, and we want to win their hearts.
A member of the Order of Canada and the Canadian Business Hall of Fame, Stronach left Magna years ago. But near its headquarters in Aurora, Ontario, streets and buildings still bear his name, with new questions hanging over his past. Thomas Dagla, CBC News, Toronto.
Police are asking for help tracking down a known sex offender who has been wanted on a Canada-wide warrant since 2021 after breaching his parole. Police say he has once again resurfaced in Toronto as a suspect in an investigation into indignity to a human body. Greg Ross has that story.
Police believe Réjean Perron may be hiding out somewhere in Toronto. They say he poses a threat to public safety.
We believe he may be exploiting vulnerable and marginalized people in Toronto, including sex workers, underhoused persons, and members of the 2S LGBTQ+ community.
Police believe this is Perron, seen in images taken from a security camera at a building on Broadview Avenue near Dundas. According to police, he was staying at the apartment of a person who had recently died, and their body was still inside.
On Monday, May 27, police attended an apartment in the Broadview and Dundas Street East area as part of a missing person investigation. In the apartment, officers located a deceased person. After examination by the coroner, it had been determined that the deceased died from natural causes.
Police believe that Perron was aware that the person had died, but continued to use their key fob to get in and out of the building. Police say that instead of reporting that the person he was living with had died, Perron instead concealed the body inside the apartment.
We allege the indignity to the human body is concealing the body within the apartment in the manner that it was concealed. So I can't get into the specifics of exactly how it was concealed. However, there were deliberate steps taken to conceal and hide the body in the apartment.
Police had been looking for Perron long before this investigation. In 2015, Perron was charged with multiple sex offenses. Police say he held a sex worker against her will, tying her up and repeatedly sexually assaulting her for days.
After serving a custodial sentence, he was released in 2021 on parole.
But Perron breached his parole shortly after being released, and that's when a Canada-wide warrant was issued for his arrest. He's been on the run ever since, only resurfacing on the police radar last month in connection with this latest investigation.
Perron is 52 years old and may also use the name of Daniel Joseph Christie, with Christie being spelt 3 different ways, with a C or with a K.
Knowing that he is still on the loose was not welcome news to those who live in the Dundas and Broadview area.
It's quite a harrowing piece of information to learn that somebody like that was just walking around our neighborhoods. I mean, I've walked here at nighttime, sometimes, coming home from someplace downtown in the middle of the night. It makes me question the safety of this neighborhood.
Anyone with information on Perron's whereabouts is asked to contact police. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Welcome back. On the first anniversary of her mayoral term, Olivia Chow passed a key item aimed at protecting renters. City staff will now work to develop a rent-evictions bylaw for Toronto, modeled after a similar piece of legislation in Hamilton. CBC's Lane Harrison has all the details.
A rent-eviction is when a landlord evicts someone so work can be done to their unit. But advocates say it's used as a loophole to get tenants out of an apartment to bump the rent, a practice Councillor Paula Fletcher has been fighting for years.
Generally, people just get fearful, as anybody would when told, we're taking your home away from you. So this now puts the onus on the landlord to say, before you do that to somebody, you have to show that you need to have that vacant. You're not simply doing cosmetic touches like new sink, new cupboards, new tile in the bathroom. You're knocking down walls.
Councillors say the enforcement of the bylaw will be funded through the renovation application fee. The mayor says all Torontonians deserve to know their housing is secure.
Having policies with no enforcement means it has no teeth, and that won't work. We will make sure that once we have the bylaw written, that we will be able to enforce it. Absolutely.
The item was voted through Wednesday morning, meaning staff will get to work on the bylaw. The only dissenter on the item was Councillor Stephen Holliday, who worries it's creating more red tape. And he brought a prop to illustrate his message.
Quite literally,
the sound of red tape being created.
Thank you.
Which Gord Perks, a supporter of the motion, quickly asked to borrow to set up a protest sign. Perks says the city needs to step up where Ontario won't.
It is literally globally understood that the right to housing is a basic human right. The housing system in the province of Ontario does not acknowledge that basic human right.
Holiday's comments resonated with one landlord advocate who says tenants can already challenge rent evictions at the Landlord and Tenant Board.
All they have to do is to apply the law. They don't have to create another bureaucracy, because that bureaucracy is going to cost money to the taxpayer and you won't solve the problem.
But tenant advocates are welcoming the move.
We just see so many landlords using renovations as a loophole in the Residential Tenancies Act to evict a tenant. And this is because in Ontario, we don't have what's called vacancy control. So in between tenants, when you move out and a new tenant moves in, they can increase the rent to any amount.
City staff will have to report back to the city's housing committee with the proposed bylaw by the end of October. The item also calls on the province to do several things, like including rent control on buildings first occupied after November 15th, 2018, and keeping that price control on units even between tenants. The province didn't respond to our request for comment on those asks. Lane Harrison, CBC News, Toronto.
Ontario's ombudsman received more than 27,000 complaints over the past year, the second highest number ever in its history. The ombudsman investigates complaints from people into various government agencies and crown corporations, including school boards, universities, and child protective services, all in an effort to try to fix those issues. Queen's Park reporter Lorenda Redekop has more on the watchdog's new annual report.
Ontario's ombudsman says his office received the second highest number of complaints ever in a single year,
totaling over 27,000 this year.
This year, the highest number of complaints were about correctional facilities, more than 4,400, a jump of 26% from the previous year. In one case, a youth inmate complained about being strip searched every time he had a visit with his lawyer. In another case, an inmate amputee said he couldn't shower without a wheelchair and shower bench he'd requested. Those issues, in the end, dealt with. At Vanier Centre for Women, multiple inmates complained about severe overcrowding and no access to services, including showers due to construction.
Most of the people in the provincial jails have not been convicted of a crime, and most of them are awaiting trial, so they're presumed innocent. So that is why the need to provide better housing and care and supports is even more pressing.
The second most common area of complaint, municipalities and municipal meetings, more than 3,600. Like previous years, one issue was meetings being held in private when they shouldn't be.
Sometimes it's a matter of changes where, there are turnovers in, for example, municipal governments where people come in and, they didn't go to city council school. And so they're learning on the job.
He says for the most part, municipalities have been receptive to suggested changes. Issues for children and youth was the third most common complaint. One young person at a group home complained about not receiving enough food, with insufficient and irregular meals. That led to a ministry inspection and changes.
A key part of our role is giving a voice to children and making sure that their voices are heard and their concerns are addressed.
The report also mentions delays on payouts for people who bet on the Super Bowl through OLG, with 40 complaints received. We spoke to two people back in March. One of them said his payment finally did come after a month. The Ombudsman says 57% of cases this past year were resolved within 2 weeks. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News.
Colette's joining us now. And Colette, if people liked the cooler feel this afternoon, they are going to be in for a treat over the next couple days, right?
Yeah, that's right. We're really going to be seeing some changing weather conditions. And, over the last few days, I've been showing you some of the flooding from the Midwest. There's another area where, boy, oh boy, would they like to see some changing conditions. I've got some images I want to show you, especially out of South Dakota, but Iowa, Minnesota also impacted. And essentially, the rainfall they saw, when I was talking about it the other day, we were looking at about 250 millimeters. Well, it came up, it was a 3-day total of about about 380 millimeters of rain in some areas. And as it all kind of funnels to the southeastern portion of the state towards the Missouri River, this is in South Dakota where it funnels to the southeast, well, it all came down around McCook Lake. And those in Union County and through this area, boy, oh boy, did they really see a lot of flooding. And so that's going to be a long time before that improves there. In the short term, we do have this improvement if you like it a little cooler and you like it less muggy. If you're looking for that summertime heat, we got a few days we got to wait. So the cooler temperatures will also bring some sunnier conditions for at least a few days, all right? And change in wind direction means that northerly flow, a little breezy at times tomorrow, not too strong, but you'll notice it. We got a pretty important weekend coming up, don't we? Well, let's show you what's going to be going on, because Saturday maybe not the best day, but it will improve after that. So today's highs, boy, up into the upper 20s, feeling like we were well into the mid 30s with the humidex. And then as those storms rolled through, that really had an impact, and those temperatures dipped pretty dramatically, went down about 10 degrees through the afternoon hours into Toronto before kind of popping back up again. Now, behind this system, we do get that clearing. Now, a puff of a few clouds kind of coming through at times, potential for that tomorrow, but mostly it's going to be a sunny day with that northerly breeze. Then the next system, that next frontal boundary, going to be moving right in overnight Friday into Saturday. And that's why I have not only some showers, but thunderstorms possibly in the forecast for Saturday. By the way, some cooler readings overnight tonight. Yeah, did you see that 12 degrees for Barrie? 22 tomorrow, the high, and 23 on Friday. And it's really not till midweek next week that I see some real heat coming back, Chris.
A nice time to have the window open, though, as you're sleeping,
Oh,
though.
for sure.
Love it. All right. Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
With the 9th pick in the 2024 NBA Draft, the Memphis Grizzlies select Zach Edey from Toronto and Purdue University.
Sorry about it, Raptors fans. Toronto's Zach Edey won't be donning a hometown jersey anytime soon. The 22-year-old center was picked 9th overall at tonight's NBA Draft by the Memphis Grizzlies. Edey, who stands 7'4", is the first Canadian to be drafted this year. And congratulations to him. Nice to see a Canadian doing so well. That is our show for you tonight. Thank you very much for watching. And we've got your next local newscast tomorrow at 6.